Hello and welcome once more to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay and my guest today is Robert Waggoner. Hi Robert.
Hi Ian.
And Robert has written a book called Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. And it's something intrigued me about the book because not only does he talk about dreaming and lucid dreaming, but he talks about his experience of finding another reality, another way of seeing who we really are. And that's in Conscious TV, that's what we look at more and more these days, who we really are. So we're going to talk to Robert about his adventures in lucid dreaming and also some of his deeper experiences and have, I hope, quite a wide discussion. So Robert, obviously we all dream.
Right.
Many of us don't know what lucid dreaming is and we'll come on to that. But let's look at, first of all, how you start the book. You talk about when you were a child, you had very vivid dreams.
You know, that's true. I would oftentimes remember my dreams quite vividly, and what surprised me, though, was occasionally I'd have precognitive dreams. Normally, I could tell they were a precognitive dream because there'd be a clock face in the dream that would start spinning wildly forward, and that was the signal that this was a precognitive dream. Or sometimes there'd be a voice behind me that would announce the events in the dream were going to occur in the next 3 years. And so I often wondered as a child, how do you get this forward-looking information in the dream state?
So what kind of events were these that you were dreaming about that were going to happen?
You know, oftentimes they were events that were personally related to something that was going to happen in my life. I remember in the one in which it said these events would happen in the next 3 years. One of them was about meeting what I consider my first spiritual teachers. And I was quite surprised in the dream to meet them, and it shocked me even more when I actually met them in physical reality later.
Hmm. And I know, especially when we're young, when we're children, the dreams are very vivid and they can be very scary at times. Was that something that you experienced?
You know, all of us experience nightmares on occasion and those kind of things. For me, dreaming was really a beautiful place of exploration and discovery and adventure. And so that's why I kind of fell in love with dreaming at an early age.
Okay, and what was the trigger to first find out about lucid dreaming? Well, tell us actually what lucid dreaming is.
Right, so lucid dreaming is defined as realizing within the dream that you are dreaming. So, for example, you might see your grandmother in a dream and realize, wait a second, Grandma's been dead for 10 years. This must be a dream. Or you'd be walking through Hyde Park and see a flying giraffe. And you'd think, wait a second, giraffes don't fly. This must be a dream. So oftentimes there'd be a trigger in there that would make you consciously realize this is a dream.
But you've got to be aware of you've got to be aware of that, because I have all kinds of ridiculous dreams, but there's not, as far as I'm aware, there's not an awareness in the dream that I'm dreaming. Right,
exactly. In normal dreams, we lack critical awareness. If we see Godzilla coming up the River Thames, we just think, oh my God, Godzilla's here, let's run.
Yes, yes.
And we just make up a story. But in a lucid dream, you would recognize, wait a second, Godzilla's a fictional character, this must be a dream. And then you could fly up to Godzilla and say, Godzilla, what do you represent? Or Godzilla, what are you doing in my dream? And what's interesting is oftentimes you get a response at that point of exactly what that dream symbol meant.
So how did you first experience this? Because you were quite young at the time, I think, weren't you?
So I was in high school and I was reading a book by Carlos Castaneda called Journey to Ixtlan. It's his third book. Carlos Castaneda, of course, was a UCLA graduate student who was interested in studying psychoactive substances like peyote and mescaline. And so he went down to Arizona to try to meet a Native American teacher. And he met this gentleman, Don Juan, and they formed a relationship over a course of many years. In this book, Don Juan tells Carlos he wants him to find his hands within a dream and become aware. And so they have a little bit of a conversation about this. And I'm reading this as a 15, 16-year-old young guy. And I think, well, there's not really very many instructions, so this is what I'll do. Each night, before I'd go to sleep, I just looked at my hands while telling myself, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And I just do that over and over and over until I got sleepy and fall asleep. 3 nights of doing this, each night before I'd go to sleep. On the 3rd night, I'm walking through a high school hallway when all of a sudden, like they're spring-loaded, my hands go boom right in front of my face. And I go, my hands, this is a dream. And it was such an incredible sensation to realize that those people over there, I now realize were dream figures. And the wall that was to my right side was dream stuff. And it was amazing to be aware within.
But did you have a feeling at that point? Was there a feeling of excitement or anxiety or?
Oftentimes, when people become lucidly aware, the first thing they have is a sense of lucid euphoria. That they have this incredible sense of kind of realization and mastery. And so you have to be a little bit careful, Iain, because if you get too excited, you'll pop right out of the lucid dream and wake to waking reality. And so what happened in this particular dream, I walked through the doorway. I started staring at the wall of the administration building in the lucid dream, and it started to shake. And I realized, oh, the dream's going to collapse. And I remembered that Don Juan had told Carlos Castaneda never to stare at anything too long, because if you would, the dream would collapse. And then he said, if that started to happen, then look back at your hands to renew the power of dreaming. I looked back at my hands, and now something strange happened. I became a dot of awareness that was floating through the palm prints of my hands as if they were giant canyons. And I'm floating through there thinking, wow, this is a lucid dream, this is incredible. I'm just this dot, and I know I'm floating through my own palm prints. Then I bounced back to original size, decided to go flying, started to fly, got so excited, I woke up. So that was my first, lucid dream.
But as a kid, this is a wonderful adventure, isn't it?
Oh, it was quite shocking. And the amazing thing was, of course, I was in high school, so I had to tell my high school friends. And they all told me, oh, you can't do that. You can't become conscious within the unconscious. And I said, but I am. I am, and this is how you do it. And so some of them I taught, they were able to do it and all. But it really wasn't until 5 or 6 years later that the scientific evidence emerged that proved lucid dreaming existed.
Okay, so who actually did the scientific evidence, and how did they prove this?
Well, there were actually 2 people, you could say. There was Keith Hearn here in England at the University of Hull at the time. He was a graduate student who knew a lucid dreamer named Alan Worsley. But Keith Hall was wondering, how could I prove, or Keith Hearn was wondering, how could I prove that he was lucidly aware? And then he realized that in dreaming, you have rapid eye movement. So he thought, what if I put polygraph pads on his eyes to get his rapid eye movement, and then had him signal from within the dream by moving his eyes left to right that he was consciously aware. And so that's what he did in 1975, he and Alan Worsley. Then Stephen LaBerge separately apparently came up with the same idea, and using himself as a subject, did the same thing in a sleep lab in 1978 in Stanford. Stephen LaBerge went on to publish his work in 1980 and became more associated with lucid dreaming as a scientific adventure.
So he was moving his hand in the dream.
Yeah,
so he was physically moving his hand.
Well, he was. Here's what Stephen LaBerge said happened. He became consciously aware. He remembered that he was in the sleep lab, that he needed to signal with his eyes. So he said in the lucid dream, he put out his dream arm and he moved it left to right 8 times, following it with his eyes, because he thought on the polygraph pad they would see the pattern of this very strange pattern of eyes moving left to right 8 times. And so now that's what we call signal verification of a lucid dream. Mm. But the amazing thing is, lucid dreaming has this vast history in spirituality and parapsychology and shamanism, but it wasn't until 1980 that the scientific evidence emerged.
Yes, and from what I've read, the bits I've read in the past, is a lot of it is drug-induced, either mushrooms or other drugs, and you're doing it completely naturally.
Right. So a lucid dream, of course, is becoming consciously aware within a dream. And so other experiences with drugs or ayahuasca or something, I would consider that a chemically induced dissociative state. Lucid dreaming, of course, is a very natural state. Every night we spend about 25% of the night in the dream state. And so becoming consciously aware within the dream is a very natural and very normal sensation.
So let's just have a look in sequence how your journey went. So for many, many years you were just exploring the dreams and having lots of adventures, and I think at one point you realize you could use this to explore reality at a deeper level.
Right. So what, as you say, at the beginning it was just a playground for the mind. You become consciously aware, you go flying around, you fly through a wall, you talk to somebody, you walk on water, you walk underwater. You could do all these incredible things and go against the physics of waking reality. But in the mid-'80s, I joined a correspondence group, and every year, or every month for 3 years, we had a goal to achieve in a lucid dream. And what really shifted for me is once the goal was find out what the dream figures in your dream represent, in your lucid dream represent. So in this experience, I became consciously aware I was dreaming. I followed a woman into an office. I walked into the office lucidly aware. There were 4 people there, and I was thinking to myself, who should I ask? Who should I find out what they represent? So I turned to the gentleman to my left who had on a 3-piece suit and a gold watch, and a very avuncular character, and I asked him, what do you represent? And what surprised me is, all of a sudden, a voice boomed out an answer from above him. When I woke up the next day, I thought, that was really strange. Why didn't he respond? Why did a voice above him respond? And after that, I realized something crucial for me, which was there might be an awareness behind the dream. And so after that, I started not interacting with the dream figures, not interacting with the dream objects, and I would just ask a question or a query to the awareness behind the dream, this non-visible awareness, and it would respond.
So there's something there that's aware of being aware.
Right, right. And people can access it as they go more deeply into lucid dreaming. So remember, I'd already been a lucid dreamer for 10 years before I got to this point. But yes, in a lucid dream, you can stop what you're doing and ask a question of the awareness behind the dream.
So can anyone do lucid dreaming?
You know, I think most anyone can do lucid dreaming. I do online workshops, and I have people in their 60s and 70s who have their first lucid dreams. But I feel anyone can do it, but it does take some practice and persistence and discipline, just like any good approach does.
So it's like meditation or anything else. You've got to stick at it. It's not like you do a couple of sessions and then you find a great piece or something.
Some people have a natural talent, a natural facility, but for the rest of us, we have to persist and work and play around with it as we go deeper into it.
Yeah. I was just looking at my notes here, and one thing that I take the notes from your book, one thing that I was really interested in was that at one point you recognized the presence of an inner advisor, and you asked, it was like having a wise old man inside.
Right, right. And you know, that was something that I recognized when I was a young person in my early teens, that sometimes just in waking reality, I'd ask questions of myself, and especially when I was a young teenager, I'd ask myself, who am I? I remember once I had this inner voice, this inner certainty, tell me that you are who you allow yourself to become. And I realized then and there that in many respects, the self is what it allows itself to be.
So what did that mean to you at that time?
You know, it's very powerful because previously I'd heard that I was everything and nothing, and so I realized that, oh yeah, I'm kind of somewhere between two extremes. But when I heard that it was about allowing oneself to become, then I realized that the fundamental issue is getting past fears, it's getting past limiting beliefs, it's getting beyond habits, and getting to a flowering, a blossoming of oneself and allowing.
Okay, and again, you talk in the book about lucid dreaming allowing you, helping you get beyond these limiting beliefs. How does that work?
Right. So oftentimes, here'd be an example. On my book's website, I have a place where people can submit questions or experiences. And so a few months ago, a young man wrote, his name Brandon, and he goes, Robert, lately in a lucid dream, when I do something inappropriate or wrong, all of a sudden my mother appears looking very disapproving. And he writes, I go up to her in the lucid dream and I tell her to disappear because she's in my dream, but she won't do anything. She just sits there looking disapproving. And he wrote, is this really her? Why is this happening? And so I wrote him back, and you could tell that this had been a persistent issue. Every time in a lucid dream he'd do something inappropriate or wrong, his mother would appear looking disapproving. And I told him that obviously his larger self, his dreaming self, is showing him that he has a sense of guilt, which might be very warranted, about what he's doing. And so he needs to look within himself about what he's doing, work through the guilt, work through the feelings of shame or whatever. And once he does that, then his mother will no longer appear in his lucid dreams looking disapproving.
Okay, so the way I understand that is through the lucid dreams, what we're getting is more information of where there's unclarities in our mind, where
Right.
we're holding on to inappropriate patterns, or we haven't reached our potential in certain areas. And through having that information from the dream, we can then take it into our waking life, if you like, and look at it in more detail. Is that correct?
Right, right. That's definitely it. And also what often happens in early lucid dreams is your habitual focus is there. So let's say I become lucidly aware. Well, within 3 seconds, I see a woman in a bikini. This happened to me quite a bit when I was a young guy, a teenager, learning how to lucid dream and all. And it was showing me, by having this repeat and repeat and repeat, that I had a habitual focus, that I, floating in my subconscious mind, was this sort of view. And so by showing it to me repeatedly, it made me realize that, oh, I have to change my focus. I have to work through this habitual viewpoint, and then I'll open up to more of what the lucid dream has to offer.
And how do you, when you say you work through this habitual point of view, how do you do that?
Right. So you realize that habits are just ideas or beliefs that you repeat over and over and over within your mind. And so
Yes.
to break a habit, you decide to focus elsewhere, to no longer agree with that belief, to no longer value it or give it importance, and you begin to break it by no longer focusing upon it and by focusing elsewhere.
So you're doing psychological work on yourself.
And that's what many people, I don't think, understand about lucid dreams. I feel every lucid dream has a lesson, and oftentimes in early lucid dreams, those are the lessons we're learning. We're learning about our inner psyche, our inner landscape. It might be cloudy, it might be sunny, but we're learning to work through it to greater and greater clarity.
And do you advise people to keep a dream journal so they have this information logged?
Right. Oftentimes, those of us who are interested in dreaming realize that unless you make notes or write down some of the dream within a minute of waking up, it'll
gone,
evaporate
it's
from
gone,
your
yeah.
mind. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so normally what I'd do is each time I'd wake up at night, I'd just jot down a few words that would be keys to remind me about the dream. But yes, I keep a dream journal, and anyone on the path of dreaming or lucid dreaming, I encourage them to keep a lucid journal.
So these these limiting beliefs, they're stopping us seeing life from a wider point of view, stopping us from seeing our bigger potential.
Right, right. They're kind of, they're so close to us that we get caught up in them and we don't see the greaterness, the broadness of human experience. So we get caught up in our own limiting beliefs and our own habits.
Mm. And I think we're all in that situation, aren't we?
Unfortunately, it's kind of a lifetime process, because even as you go deeper, you realize that these limiting beliefs and fears, they're kind of like an invisible fence that keep us from growing further. And so we have to get beyond limiting beliefs and more broad beliefs, get beyond fears to greater trust and acceptance in order to truly explore the grandeur of the psyche.
And how was that for you, that process? Is it because you kind of discovering that you're a real pioneer of this whole area, so you were discovering this on your own to some extent, weren't you?
To some extent, I was. You have to realize that most of this occurred before the internet and all, and there
Yes,
really
yeah.
wasn't very much information. Again, I'd been reading the books by Carlos Castaneda to give me some insight, the books by Jane Roberts, the Seth material to give me some insight. At that time, Stephen LaBerge came out with a book, but there really wasn't very much to go on. So one thing that I did discover, and what kind of surprised me as I went deeper, is oftentimes within the lucid dream, I would hear a voice behind me say, "Trust, nothing to fear." Or sometimes in a lucid dream, I'd see banners floating in the sky that said, "Trust, nothing to fear." It was like there was an inner self, an inner knowing that was encouraging me to go deeper and deeper, and it knew to go deeper, I had to let go of fears and trust in this inner knowingness.
And was that an easy process for you to trust that voice or that banner that's saying trust?
You know, after I went through this entire period of asking questions to the awareness behind the dream, I started to realize that its knowing was vast, and so I did begin to trust it. For example, once I became lucidly aware, and I wondered if the awareness behind the dream understood conceptual information, could explain a concept. So I'd been reading about the idea of feeling tones in the works by Jane Roberts, that all of us have a feeling tone, which is the essence of ourself. And I wondered, is it a feeling or a tone? So I just ignored all the dream figures. I shouted out to the awareness behind the dream, "Hey, I want to hear my feeling tone." And then it was very interesting, Ian. At that moment, about 20 meters above me, a little black dot appears, and from it comes this "ah" sound. And I'm thinking, wow, this is strange. And as I watch, it starts to develop a cone, and as the cone gets bigger, the "ah" sound gets even louder. And finally, this cone has gotten giant size. Now it's come all the 20 meters down to me, and it's literally vibrating my body apart. And this is my feeling tone. This is the essence of myself. At that moment, my sense of self-identity stopped, and my awareness took refuge in this larger self that was watching this vibrating cone, that then had to remember who this Robert character was in order to recapitulate him. And when it did, I found myself lucidly aware, sitting in front of my house, my feet in a full lotus position, my fingers in a mudra, glowing gold from within, and remembering, oh yeah, I just heard my feeling tone. So that's how amazing this experience can be. You can actually experience concepts full on in the lucid dream state.
So that gave you the idea that you're not Robert, or you're not just Robert.
It gave me the idea that this feeling tone, this vibratory sound, is truly my essence. What surprised me is 2 years later, I was at a bookstore and I got a book on mantras and yantras. And in Hindu belief, things begin by virtue of what they call a seed syllable, a bindu, a little dot, and from that emits the sound that creates this phenomenal universe. And it shocked me that in this lucid dream, I had basically experienced that conceptual view of the bindu, the seed dot, from which comes the mantra that creates the phenomenal self and the phenomenal universe.
But how did that change your perception of day-to-day life, the fact that you had this beginning of a realization?
Well, what I think it does more so is it makes you start to break down the boundaries of the ego self. Oftentimes the ego self is totally involved in relating to physical reality, worried about its status and stature, how it appears in the eyes of others. But when you see that there's this larger self, you realize that there's this larger knowing that the ego is couched within. So the ego doesn't have to do everything. It doesn't have to know everything, that it can go within and kind of rest within this larger awareness and work from that sort of perspective.
It's kind of a relief to know that, isn't it?
You know, it's very comforting. I think that's why oftentimes people have gone very deeply into lucid dreaming. They have a certain kind of calmness or something about them that makes them, in many ways, a transformed person.
I know in the book you also talk about emotional and also physical healing that can take place.
Right. So in lucid dreaming, as it currently stands, the primary use for it in scientific sense is using lucid dreaming to combat recurring nightmares from post-traumatic stress disorder. So a therapist would teach someone who's having recurring nightmares, okay, you only see those witches when you're having a nightmare. The next time you see the witches, realize that you're dreaming and turn and confront them. And oftentimes, by just having one experience, they'll no longer have those recurring nightmares. But I think they could actually take it further. A friend of mine who's a lucid dreamer told me that she wanted to come to a dream conference, but was afraid of flying. And did I think lucid dreaming could help her overcome her fear of flying?
Right.
And so what I suggested to her, I said, the next time you become lucid, the next few times, go get on an airplane. You know it's a dream airplane. You know you can't be hurt. And feel what it feels like to be in a plane. See what that sense is like. And she began to do that, and within a month or two, she told me, oh, I booked a ticket to come to the conference because I've been doing this in a lucid dream so much, I've worked through my fear of it. And she came to the conference, had no trouble flying. She also asked me if I could think of using lucid dreaming to get rid of anxiety, because she was being treated for anxiety. So I asked her to do this. I said, in a lucid dream, just announce to the dream, hey dream, I want to be free of anxiety for the next week. She did that. She became lucidly aware, asked to be free of anxiety for a week. She said when she woke up, she's like a different person. She didn't feel anxiety. And she went on doing this until she came to her regularly scheduled psychiatric appointment, where the doctor, psychiatrist, asked her, what's happening to you? And she told him that she'd been practicing lucid dreaming and to get rid of anxiety. And he goes, it's incredible. You have virtually no anxiety. I'm removing your prescription down to the very lowest level. So this is how people can use it to deal with emotional issues, I feel. But you can also use lucid dreaming to actually heal one's physical body. And I have a chapter of that on my book.
Can you talk more about the physical side? It's situations where you know that the people have actually had a healing?
Right. So here would be a very simple example. There's a woman, Annie, who had plantar warts on her feet. And these plantar warts had gotten so painful that it was hard to walk. And for months, she'd been trying to visualize these things to go away, but they were just not going away. So a friend told her, you could try in a lucid dream. She became consciously aware in a lucid dream, remembered that she wanted to rid herself of plantar warts. So she created a ball of healing light in her lucid dream. She put it over each of her feet, intending for them to be healed. When she woke up, she says she looked at her feet, all the plantar warts had turned black, and within 10 days they fell off and they never returned. So that you could see how you could use this in a scientific experiment. You get 40 people with a non-threatening illness, have 20 of them be the control group, 20 of them be the experimental group that you teach the lucid dream and how to use healing in a lucid dream, and then come back a year later and see which group has had the most improvement.
Are there times when people, yourself or other people, have anxiety within the lucid dream?
You know, sometimes in a lucid dream, you often wonder if you've gone too far. Once in a lucid dream, I wondered, what is chi? What is energy? And all of a sudden on the far horizon, I saw these two brilliant white lights, and it was like they were spinning, and it was like they were like tornadoes coming my way. And as I'm lucidly watching this, I was thinking, what have I done here? You know, I've asked to experience what is chi. And finally, they were just these two brilliant kind of tornado-like circulating counterclockwise with 3 plumes of light within each of them. And as they got close to me, I just started laughing because I knew it was a lucid dream, and I merged with one of the representations of chi. But so yes, you can have moments when you ask to experience something, and the experience of it is so incredible that you have kind of a moment of anxiety that, what have I done here?
It seems to me that, and maybe I misread this, but you also need to have a certain intelligence in lucid dreaming as you do in day-to-day life, in ordinary life. You need to be intelligent about situations. It seems that the same rules almost apply in lucid dreaming.
Right.
Is that true?
I think you do. I think it's very true. It's also interesting, when I started to reach out to people when I was writing my book about experiences they'd had with the awareness behind the dream, I interacted with one woman who heads up the ldforall.com lucid dreaming forum. And she told me in a lucid dream, she asked to be shown the beginning and end of the universe. All of a sudden, a voice announced, the universe has no beginning or end. The universe is an everlasting cycle. So you can see how when you interact with the awareness behind the dream, it doesn't always agree with your questions or your assumptions. It often refutes them and offers an alternative explanation. Or there's another example where a friend of mine, Ed Kellogg, decided in a lucid dream he wanted to experience a quantum mechanics idea of a hypercube. And so he announced in the lucid dream that he wanted to experience a hypercube. All of a sudden, a voice announced that at that moment, he wasn't focused enough to endure what he was asking to experience. That he should come back when he has greater focus and greater clarity of intent in order to withstand what he's asking to experience. And then he mentioned in parentheses, oh yeah, there was a woman in a bikini in this lucid dream. So you can see how even when you ask the awareness behind the dream for information, sometimes it'll refute your basic assumption, and sometimes it'll look at you as a psychological being and say that basically you're not ready for what you're asking to experience.
So there's a real wisdom there as well, isn't there?
There's a real wisdom, and that's why I call my book Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. Carl Jung came up with an idea that to show that there is an inner ego and inner self, it would have to have these certain characteristics like perception, apperception, imagination, will, feeling, memory, and all these things. And I show that in lucid dreams you can see examples of all of that when we interact with this awareness behind the dream, that there is this inner awareness that's completely aware, ready to respond, but it does so in a larger, more broad sense.
And I know you've had yourself experience of a non-dual state within lucid dreaming. Talk us through that. What happened, how that affected you?
So what happened after 20 years of lucid dreaming, I knew that the lucid dream was in many respects a creation of my waking and unconscious minds projected out there. That's what the lucid dream was. And a dream was much the same thing. It was a projection of my ego and subconscious issues. And then I began to think that actually waking life in many respects was a co-creation, was kind of a projection of my waking ego thoughts and my unconscious co-creating. But I wanted to know what was beyond that. What would happen? Was there a source reality? What was beyond my beliefs, beyond my expectations, beyond my own intent and will? And so at that time, something strange began to happen. At night I'd fall asleep and there'd be nothing but blue light.
Okay, so you've fallen asleep,
right?
And then you're aware within the dream, and all you see with your awareness in the dream is blue light.
You know, it was like I'd fall asleep and there was blue light. There wasn't really a dream because there was no action, no symbols, no plot, no me. And I'd wake up in the morning and I was kind of alarmed because what do I put in my dream journal? Blue light? I mean, nothing happened. And this began to happen on occasion. I remember one morning I went down to the breakfast table and my wife says, "Robert, what's happening to you?" And I asked her why she asked. She said last night she had woken up and looked at me, and she said I had the most incredible look of bliss on my face. She had never seen a person look so blissful. And she wanted to know what was happening. And I told her I was trying to understand the ultimate nature of reality, and I was having some very odd experiences. What happened after this, Ian, was something kind of strange. I became lucidly aware as these figures were taking me through this kind of deep blueness to this sanctuary where I become fully aware, and I see this figure composed of blue light. Now the interesting thing about this figure is the figure was 3 times bigger than me. So it's 16 feet or 5 meters or whatever. And I started laughing because is this a blue light god or a blue light monster? And I didn't know exactly how to respond, so I decided in a kind of Carlos Castaneda way to get beyond it, to run to the other side of it. And right as I ran up to it and got equal to it, this giant explosion occurred as if all the cells in my body had changed. And I woke up from that and had no place to put that, The only thing it reminded me of is sometimes in Buddhist iconography, you'll see figures composed of blue light. Then finally, within a week or so of that, I was going to sleep one night, and I could hear my inner self ask me, did I really want to go beyond lucid dreaming? And I I said I definitely did. And it told me that if I was to go beyond, it might mean that I would cease to be. And I said, I've gotten to the point now where I have to know what's behind lucid dreaming, what's source reality, because otherwise this whole waking world seems like a tragic comedy. And so that's when I had just an extraordinary experience of non-duality.
I would cease to be.
Right? It was very quite serious, and I had the sense at that moment that by going this final step, I might not return to this dimension. And so I took it very seriously, that this was a truly serious piece of advice.
What actually happened?
So what I recall, kind of imagine awareness within pure awareness. There's no sense of identity, it's just awareness within this field of awareness, in a sense knowing that all awareness interconnects. And there's not really an I to see it because there's no identity. Then all of a sudden that comes to an end and I'm in this space and here's a figure and I say to it, what was that? Was that a lucid dream? And it said, oh no, to enter a lucid dream, go here. And I step into that space and all of a sudden I'm going through a tunnel of blue light and finally pop up into a lucid dream. So when I woke up in the morning, I thought, okay, I had a lucid dream. I had basically a dream of clarity where I talked to this figure and asked what was that experience. But what was that thing first, that awareness, being aware within awareness? And I didn't have any concept for it until 3 years later when I heard Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, who wrote the Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep, talk about the ultimate goal of dream yoga being an experience of clear light, or an experience of non-dual awareness, or awareness within pure awareness.
But how does that affect your day-to-day life, the fact you had this amazing experience?
Right. So having an experience like that, you return from it with a knowledge that everything is interconnected, that the mystics were right, that in a sense everything is one, that we all exist within a oneness. And so even though on the surface level there's the explicate order, as a physicist might say, that underneath it is an implicate order, there's an interconnected oneness. And so by virtue of that knowledge, it gives you a new perspective, a new stance from which to relate to the world and view your own experience.
Things must relax in you when you really realize that you are oneness in effect.
Well, you know that there is this level of oneness and that it exists, and in a certain sense, there's nothing to fear, and that you can trust.
Yeah, I was going to read a couple of things here, which just going in the more for people who are watching who maybe are quite intrigued by this whole lucid dreaming idea. And one thing I wrote down from your book was lucid dreamers must learn to focus simultaneously on both their inner conscious awareness and the apparent dreaming activities. To maintain lucidity must develop a proper balance of mindful, aware, interacting to engage the dream consciously. Now explain that more in down-to-earth language.
So at the very beginning, when you become lucidly aware, at the very beginning, oftentimes the lucid dreams are very short. You'll get so excited, you'll pop out. Or the other thing is what I'm talking about here, which is you're kind of walking a tightrope of awareness. You're aware of being aware. You have a sense of a meta-awareness. But if you get too involved in the dream, like let's say I'm having a lucid dream and I know that I'm dreaming, but over here I see a magician who's playing a flute and a snake is coming out of a basket. If I get too involved in that, I'll lose my awareness of being aware and I'll return to regular dreaming. So just the fact that you're lucid at the beginning especially, you have to develop that mindfulness that this is a dream, otherwise you can get re-entranced by the dreaming.
Yeah, it kind of, I'm just thinking like when you watch a really absorbing film in the cinema, you can get so involved in the film, you get
Right, you'll find yourself
emotional. And the trick is somehow to enjoy the film and get a bit carried away, but not completely caught up.
Right, exactly.
Is that a similar thing?
And that's very much what it's like, and a skill that one definitely has to have, especially in their beginning as a lucid dreamer, because otherwise you'll get entranced and lost back into the dreaming.
So where does this go for you now? You've been doing lucid dreaming for what, about 30 years, I guess?
Yeah, over 30 years. So I wrote a book, and well, one thing that was kind of interesting, when I gave my book to the publisher, my editor, I had a chapter on there of interacting with past life selves in a lucid dream. And she gave me back that chapter, said that only 1 in 4 people in a recent poll said they believed in past lives, and so she was giving that back to me. But there's a vastness to explore in the lucid dream state. Besides emotional healing and physical healing, you can also see the width and breadth of awareness. You can see, can you get telepathic information in a lucid dream? Can you get precognitive information? How broad is this awareness? How can you access your inner muse, your inner creativity when you're consciously aware in the dream state? And so you see that lucid dreaming is actually another realm of growth and fulfillment and maturation. So there's always new levels, new plateaus to go to.
And you're also telling me when we talked earlier that you could actually meditate in a dream.
Right. Well, one of the most incredible things is performing spiritual practices in the lucid dream state. Because when you're consciously aware at that level of the subconscious, all those ego things have gone away. You know, you're not worried about the phone ringing or any of that kind of stuff. You're at this deep level. So if you stop and begin to meditate within a lucid dream, normally within seconds, you'll have an incredibly transcendent experience of some sort. And it surprises me. I've got lucid dream experiences of people who have decided to meditate in a lucid dream, and virtually everybody has had utterly profound experiences that they could hardly imagine. But if you have a different tradition, I have a friend who's interested in the Kabbalah. And so in a lucid dream, he will chant one of the names, one of the divine names. And he says sometimes as he begins to chant one of the divine names, if he's chanting it exactly correctly, he says it's like 1,000 voices begin to chant with him, and the whole lucid dream just develops this incredible energy and power and majesty. So you can take it very, very much deeper than you'd ever normally imagine.
Yeah. It's just, there's a whole world there, isn't there? Incredible world, which is probably as vast as the world we see on the waking life.
The beautiful thing about dreaming, though, is dreaming is a dimension by which you can actually influence your waking life. There's a correspondence, there's an interaction. So instead of going to some far-off dimension that has nothing to do with this dimension, dreaming actually will help you with emotional healing, with emotional realizations. It'll help you with physical realizations, and then it'll help you along in your spiritual path if you're thoughtful and know how to approach it.
You were telling me when we talked on the phone yesterday about a friend of yours you dreamed about who needed $10,000. That was a really good story, that.
Well, so this wasn't a dream. This was a waking experience. And this is what I'm trying to say is that you can get to this deep level of being aware also in meditation experience during waking. So what happened about 7 years ago, I was meditating one afternoon, and I got down deep, and I got down so deep that I could feel my inner self, just like I do in a lucid dream. And so I reached out to my non-visible inner self, and I say, what do you have to say to me? It said, and I heard this internally, we want you to send $10,000 to your friend Paul back in your hometown. And I think, whoa, and I come out on my meditation, and I think, that was really strange. And I didn't know what quite to make of it. My friend Paul lives 8 hours away in my hometown. The next day, I'm meditating, and I get down deep, and now I feel my inner self and the deceased mother of my friend Paul. And I reach out to my inner self, and I say, what do you have to say to me? And it says, we want you to send $10,000 to your friend Paul. And so I come out of it, and I think, well, if I ever have a dream that happens twice, I always do what the dream indicates. And so I went to my wife, and I said, I'm having this experience in the meditation. What do you think we should do? My wife had a great idea. She said, let's just send him a check for $1,000 and write him a note that if he needs help, we'll help him. I put that in the mail. 4 days later, he calls up, and he's blubbering over the phone. He says, Robert, a week ago, I went to my mother's grave, and I told her that if someone didn't help me, I was going to kill myself. And I asked my friend what was happening. His father had broken his hip in a fall in the bathroom 3 months earlier, and now was in a nursing home. And my friend wanted $10,000 to build on a disabled bathroom onto his house to have his father come live with him. And so we sent him the funds, and he went and built the place and brought his dad there, and his dad lived there for the next 6 years. It was really an utterly transformational experience for my friend. But the fundamental point is, in the meditative state, you can get to the same state that experienced lucid dreamers are getting to and get the same sort of information.
Yeah, it's where, you know, with your experience you had about oneness, we're all coming from the same source. It makes sense that if we're able to drop down to that space or taste that space, somehow we're going to pick up information, because it's, in a way, it's all us, isn't it? And your friend is another expression of what is ultimately you.
Well, I don't know if it's all us, but we're connected to all it.
There's connection there.
Is one
yeah.
way. In my book, in the final chapter, I talk about how once my wife and I were floating down the Grand Canyon on a 7-day float trip. And after 3 or 4 days of being without...
This is not a 7-day dream, this is a 7-day...
This is a 7-day
okay.
actual physical reality trip.
Yeah.
And after 3 or 4 days of sleeping out under the stars and not seeing TV and not having cell phones, you become very natural, and I was having very vivid dreams. But one day in waking reality, we were in Havasu Canyon, which is where they have this beautiful waterfall and all that feeds into the Colorado River, the Grand Canyon. And so we'd all hiked up a mile to it, gotten into the stream, and it just felt like heaven to be in this cool water while outside it was 100 degrees. All of a sudden, I reached out, because I knew that everything's aware. I reached out to the canyon. I say, Canyon, what do you have to say to me now? All of a sudden, internally, I heard the canyon say, get out while you still can. And I thought, whoa, what was that about? And so I got back into a meditative state 5 minutes later, and I asked the canyon, what do you have to say to me? And it goes, get out while you still can. So I stood up and I told my wife, hey, we got to get out of this canyon. We got to go back to the boat. And no one could understand why until a minute later I saw in this slot canyon the edge of a thunderstorm coming, a thundercloud, and I knew that there's going to be a flash flood in this canyon in a matter of time. And so we all got out of the canyon, and all of a sudden the crew was running up from the boat telling us we had to leave because there's going to be a flash flood. So in my mind, everything is conscious and aware. And I think that's where science is taking us. Right now we know that energy and matter are fundamentally one and the same. And I think we're going to get to the point finally where energy and matter and consciousness are fundamentally one and the same. And when we have that realization on a scientific and cultural level, I think will, in some respects, be a new awareness, a new consciousness for all of mankind.
And we need it, don't we, in terms of the way we're acting?
To meet the challenges and all, we really need to get in touch with our deeper creativity and be able to meet these challenges on the physical level and express them on the physical level.
Do you get a feel or something in your dreams about what's happening with mankind?
It's interesting. A couple years ago, I had 2 figures show up in a lucid dream. One was a woman who was awake, and her partner was a man who was asleep. And the woman told me, she looked at me and she goes, 80 of your years is 1 year to me. It's something like 80, maybe it was 100. But basically, she was telling me that our sense of time perspective was much different. But she came to tell me, she goes, ancient spiritual knowledge is returning to your system, and I want you to be aware of it. And I thought it was interesting when I woke up that the woman, which is kind of representative of the inner knowledge, was awake, but the man was asleep. So it's like it hasn't materialized yet. But that's what I feel is truly coming about, is that we're coming into a new period where ancient spiritual knowledge is returning to this system, and hopefully we'll all benefit from it. And I think lucid dreaming is one of those practical techniques that we can use to get in touch with that inner reality and begin to express it in this outer reality. We've
got about 4 or 5 minutes left. Just let's look at practical things that somebody who's been watching this program is a bit intrigued, that may be a little bit wary or not quite sure about the whole thing. What's the best, you mentioned how you started with being
Right.
aware of your hand in the dream.
Right.
What's the best starting point for people that might want to have a bit of a go at this, let's say?
Yeah. So, of course, you have to begin to remember your dreams. And so you can definitely use the hand technique. Look at your hands while telling yourself, tonight in my dreams I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. So this is a stimulus response, a conditioned response technique. Because in a dream, when you see your hands, the first thing you got to think is, this is a dream. So you might be climbing a ladder and see your hands and go, oh, my hands, this is a dream. So you have to practice it in order to build that associational link. You can also just use regular suggestion. You can tell yourself before you go to sleep, just kind of flood your mind with the idea, tonight in my dreams, I'll be more critically aware. And when I see something strange, I'll realize I'm dreaming. And so just in a kind of suggestion, just keep saying that over and over. Or you can do a mindfulness technique. So you could ask yourself throughout the day, am I dreaming? How do I know? And if you start to ask yourself that 5 or 10 or 20 times a day, you'll find yourself in a dream asking yourself, am I dreaming? How do I know? And you'll become lucidly aware. I remember once a woman told me that she became lucidly aware almost every night because she had a neurotic habit. Throughout the day, she'd ask herself, what was I just doing? And so she'd be in a dream, and she'd ask herself, now what was I just doing? And she remembered she'd put it on her pajamas, so this must be a dream. And that's how she taught herself how to become lucidly aware, by critically examining her mindset or her perceived environment. And that's what I call developing a lucid mindset.
So there's different little techniques, but it seems to me underneath, excuse me, the most important thing is intent, is wanting to have this experience.
Right. Having kind of a clarity of intent and a deep interest in lucid dreaming and wanting to become aware, just the curiosity. I know some people, just by listening to this tape tonight, are going to have their first lucid dream.
Really? So it just happens anyway?
Yeah, and oftentimes people reading my book, they'll tell me by page 50 I had 5 lucid dreams. It's just when you get your mind into that state, oftentimes it'll be reflected in the dreaming.
Good. Okay, well, it's been fascinating. There's lots more we could talk about, but time is finite here. But I'm going to show you a book again. You're in London for a conference this weekend, I know, and Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self. And for me, it was interesting, having been someone that hasn't actually had a lucid dream, seeing the potential and now listening to you here, realizing that it's probably quite an easy thing to do. And not only that, it is the gateway to a whole new world. And it's like we can use that information to practically change our lives, to understand ourselves better.
And have a new awakening. We all know the name Buddha means awakened. And lucid dreaming is a way that each of us, at whatever level we're capable, can begin to awaken.
Great. Okay, Robert, thanks very much for coming on to Conscious TV. And thank you, everybody out there, again, for watching us. And I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.